I want to go ahead and thank our panelists and our audience for joining us today for the inaugural Leading Patriots series. This is one we've been looking forward to for a while, been in development for several months. We're going to get this started with an amazing panel discussing the future of government contracting in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. My name is Brett Josephson. I am an associate professor of marketing and the director of executive development. And I will be getting us started today, and I'll then hand it over to my colleague, Jerry McGinn, who will be moderating the conversation with our three amazing Mason alumni panelists. So with that, before we kind of dive too deeply, I do want to give a large, a huge shout out and thank you to Sumit Srivastava. Sumit and I had this idea several months ago to bring together called Leading Patriots, leading Mason alumni who were within specific industry verticals to come together and talk about how the pandemic was shaping their here, now, and into the future, shaping their industries and what it was doing and what they thought the future of their industry looks like. And the goal was to provide value back to our alumni, to Mason Patriots who were existing in those industries. And so with that, if you don't know Sumit, CEO of Array Technologies, and he is the president-elect of the Alumni Association. So he is a Mason grad. And with that, we couldn't have done this without both Jen Robinson and Michelle Murphy, who were a part of the Alumni Association. And this really is, for Mason, a first, an enterprise-wide effort to get people from as many of the schools and colleges within the university together to provide insights. And in fact, on the panel, we have quite an array of units within Mason represented within this vertical. So do want to thank, once again, Sumit, Jen, and Michelle for all their hard work for getting this up and running. And with that, just a little bit of the agenda and the schedule. So going to give a little bit of a brief introduction to both the series and what we're trying to accomplish here. And then I'm going to turn it over to Jerry, who will provide a little bit more of the introductions of the panel. Alay Sason, Hannibal Jackson, and JJ Stakem. Mason alumni through and through, Mason Patriots who have been leading companies in this industry for quite some time, and quite an experienced panel. And we do want you to be able to provide, to ask questions of our panelists. So go ahead and use either the Zoom Q&A or the chat feature. I'll be monitoring that throughout the webinar. So if you have questions, we'll try to get them to the panel, as well as leave hopefully about 10 minutes near the end to be able to ask questions of these three incredible people. Now with that, before I kind of get into what Exec Ed and the Alumni Association, just a brief background on this idea of this series. So we talked about it within the industry verticals that we wanted to focus on, but it really bent out of the idea of the Patriots Helping Patriots series, something the university has started where Mason alumni are coming together and supporting each other throughout their careers and throughout their development. We're 200,000 strong in terms of Mason alumni, and it's something that as an area we can really leverage and give back. And quite a few, I think the statistic, 75% of Mason alumni live within 50 miles of campus, which means quite a few of you are interacting in a day-to-day basis with the federal contracting community. So we really thought this is a series that makes a complete sense for what we're trying to do. Some of the research that we've done in the School of Business shows that quite a few of our MBAs, almost 60% of our MBAs, get an MBA to try to advance their career. But what they actually say is the value of their MBA comes from the alumni association that they have, the networks that they form within their degrees. And that gives them the value for their careers moving forward. So we really want to try to create that within these series, giving you the opportunity to network and find like-minded people who have a shared connection about being at Mason. So just real quickly about executive development, we are housed within the School of Business, but our charge and vision is to support the entire university and the entire capital region. We make a kind of a pledge or a promise that from the time you graduate throughout your career, executive development is supposed to be there to help you along your career trajectory. Learn new skills, refine new competencies, in order to allow you to have the career that you were looking for. We do this through a variety of programs for individuals and for organizations and groups. Feel free to reach out to us. We're always there to bring Mason expertise, the same faculty you took in undergrad and grad school, and bring them into a different environment to provide you the latest techniques, skills, and competencies needed to thrive in today's business environment. With that, I also want to give a little bit about the Alumni Association. Founded in 1968, what's amazing is this school has grown, the university has grown to over 200,000 alumni. Right? The vast majority live in this region, so we are all impacted by government contracting in the different forms of the federal government. And one of the things that I am passionate about, that I'm glad that the Alumni Association takes seriously, is that once you are a patriot, you're always a patriot, and we stay with you throughout your career. That's not true of every institution. I'll just leave it at that we really do want to continue with that promise that we make, that Mason provides an access to excellence, and it doesn't go away. We're with you 100% of the way. So if you're looking to engage, I really encourage you to get connected with the Alumni Association, both in terms of its networking opportunities, its career and professional services. It is a resource that you can use for your entire career. A lot of the statistics show a lot of the jobs that you get are from networks that you leverage. So make sure that you are plugging in and getting connected with the local, whatever alumni association, the central one, as well as within your college, within your unit. So with that, I want to turn it over to Jerry McGinn, Dr. Jerry McGinn, who will give a little bit of an overview about the center in which he is the executive director.
Great. Thanks, Brett, and welcome to everyone. It's great to be with you all. So the Center for Government Contracting, we established, I came from the government actually and joined Mason a couple of years ago and stood up the center at the beginning of last year. And the whole notion of the center is that Mason, a big chunk of our alumni and our students come from this industry, the overall ecosystem that is government and government contracting, which is sort of and so we set up this center to be a nexus for addressing the business, policy, regulatory issues impacting that overall community. When we say government contracting, we mean in the broad sense of the word, how your business is run, how the business of government gets done. And so we've been doing that now, and the way we implement this vision is through 3 lines of effort, and that's research, education, and training and collaboration. So our goal is to be a thought leader on government contracting issues. We publish reports and write commentaries and appear on TV and get quoted in newspapers to help build Mason's brand. And we work with faculty to help their research as well. And then we do education and training. We help the executive development and the faculty kind of bolster their programs with government contracting offerings. And then finally, we do collaboration, which is outreach and events such as this and other webinars we've done, as well as events where we bring government, industry, and academia together. So that's the center in a nutshell. And on the last slide, you'll see our contact info, our webpage, and then our contact email. So if you want to sign up for our events list or find out more, just please go there, and I'd love to talk to you separately as you'd like. So, but moving on to the business today, we're very fortunate to have 3 prominent alums with incredibly diverse and interesting backgrounds to talk about how government contracting, how do we operate in the steady state / post-COVID-19 era. So we're privileged to have Hala Seshan, who's the COO of Creativeminds, management consulting firm that improves technical performance management. And she's worked in P&L roles in a number of different firms and companies, including GDIT. And she's a native of Tehran. If you read her bio, it's a very fascinating experience. And she's come to Mason and got her bachelor's and master's from 2 schools within the university. So hello, welcome. And if you could tell us a little fun fact about your experience at Mason or something else in your life. Thanks.
Sure, absolutely. Yes, Haleh Saisan, and I currently work in a service disabled veteran-owned company called Catexas. That's a management consulting. And fun fact about me at Mason was in 1999, when I had my last semester for my bachelor degree, and we had an entrepreneurship, technical entrepreneurship was the name of the class. It was actually a graduate school, but we were taking that. And it was, the whole semester was about coming up with a business plan, the whole business plan presented in front of a jury, and there was a 5,000 award. And our idea back then, our team, myself and 2 other people, was the only one that did a .com idea. And this was before Facebook. It was a very similar Facebook idea. I could have been Mike Zuckerberg, I guess. But yeah, we did likeyou.com, which was a site to build communities and get in touch with people when you're remote, etc. So we won the $5,000.
Wow. Outstanding. Okay,
Yeah,
excellent.
that was fun.
Great. All right. All right. Next, we have Hannibal Jackson. Hannibal Jackson is the president, CEO, and founder of YTech, which was a 8A firm, but has graduated from the small business program. And now he's got over 100 million. He's won over $100 million in prime contract awards. Has done tremendous work in a number of different government contracting communities, both in defense and non-defense kind of activities. He has a master's degree from the University of Maryland University College, but we will not hold that against him. But his first love is that he's got a Bachelor of Communications from George Mason, and in the School of Business. And he's a member of my advisory board on the Center for Government Contracting as one of our distinguished Black alumni. So Hannibal, over to you.
Thanks, Jerry, for the introduction. As Jerry said, my name is Hannibal Jackson. I'm a proud graduate of George Mason University. Fun fact, first I'd like to thank all the GMU alumni that graduated after '99 for increasing the value of my degree. I think when I applied to George Mason, probably they accepted everybody. My first semester, I think I was put on academic probation. After that, I turned it around, settled down, became a little bit more focused, ultimately went on to become the George Mason University Homecoming King. I think I was the second African-American to win that. To win that. And then I went on to win the Top Student Leader of the Year. And as Jerry mentioned, I am proud to serve on the GovCon Contracting Advisory Board. And last year I was recognized as the 2019 George Mason University Distinguished Black Alumni. So I'm happy to be here with you today, and I hope I can add some value to the conversation.
Great. And next we have JJ Stankin, who's our most senior member of the group. No, in terms of, not in terms of age, but we're very excited to have him. JJ is the president and founder of Objective Area Solutions. He works in the public sector aviation space, and has worked over 20 years of experience in this, both in the public and private sector. And he currently is working on serves on the Air Traffic Control Association, one of the subcommittees and annual planning committee. He's been very active with the Charter School Alumni Association, and I've run into him there. And we're excited to have him. And in his free time, he's also a pilot. So over to you, JJ, for your brief introduction.
Great, thank you very much. So excited to be here. Thank you very much for the opportunity to participate on the panel. I think covered most of it in the introduction there, but I guess the fun fact for me is just a little bit ironic is I was originally drawn back to grad school at George Mason because of a blog that was written by now retired professor Mark Adelson. And the title of that blog the website was www.managementisdead.com. And it was a whole discussion about the change of management and what was to come. Ended up coming in and meeting with Professor Adelson, and then sort of becoming fascinated with the field of organization development. But hopefully now, as we grow the company, management is dead lessons have sort of been incorporated, and we've sort of transitioned into the next phase of management for small and growing companies. But thank you for the opportunity to be here, and look forward to participating on the panel.
Yeah, no, management is dead, sort of an existential issue for you now. So I would hope that you're past that for all of you. All right, next, great. All right, so as Brett mentioned at the front end, one of the things that, there's been, I know you all have not been on any webinars in the last 2.5 months, or any Zoom calls or the like. It's all been, just phone calls or the like. But, the point is that there's been a lot of Zoom webinars on coping with COVID, and we've all personally lived through that experiences, and our panelists have as well. But now when things are starting to level off to a degree, the question that we keep coming back to is what's sticky? We've had this tremendous change in our work environment, in our hiring practices, in relationships with our government customers. What sticks, what doesn't, how much comes back, and the like. And so that's the overall theme that we wanted to hit on. And we're going to do it in 4 different areas. The first is on spending. Now, through the center, we've put a number of reports on spending trends, and this is a screenshot of one of those. And if you look in the end of March, in the course of the last week of March, we had, our federal obligations skyrocketed from 200 million to actually it was about 300 million to 2 billion in the course of a week. So it was tremendous, and that has continued. That's leveled off a little bit. Initial spending was all in focus on the HHS, Department of Veterans Affairs, FEMA, and a little bit of DoD. Now we're starting to see other agencies come in. So the question is, what sticks? What funding areas remain popular? And there's lots of bits different of contracting approaches. You've seen more OTAs and consortia. You've seen, they're sort of throwing the kitchen sink at different ways, quick turnaround opportunities that have been on beta.sam.gov. So I want to get each of your respective views on what do you see in your businesses sticking, and where do you see where do you see things going? So why don't we start with Hala? Why don't you start with you?
Yes, sure. So I think we saw again, temporary versus permanent. We obviously saw a shift in the way the business operates, and our client business operations as well. And there was some immediate reaction. So we saw a flow of very quick, nimble COVID-19 or related studies from HHS, for example, as you mentioned, HHS, VA, especially the R&D optics of HHS. We just recently had one from HRTU. So I think those were immediate, studies, research type RFPs that we saw. I think over time, and as things get stable, we may see a change of pace. So things that were in their vision, for example, telehealth. I come from health and health IT background in the government, in the GovCon environment, defense health and VA and HHS. So the concept of telehealth was always there. We would see spending on that. But now you would see an increase in pace in actually implementing the vision that they have had for years. We already see that telehealth is being more seriously implemented in the civilian and in the private sector as well. So that's one example that I can give that I think, again, where the government, the VA, the HHS had the vision to implement health-related, healthcare services to veterans or civilians, those trends would just increase the pace. The other area is virtual environment, So again, we have been, I was just telling Brett that a number of our contracts support DoD at the Pentagon. And oftentimes our staff had to be there 9 to 5 every single day. That's changed. So creating that infrastructure to support a virtual environment for support for services. I think that's another example.
Great. Hannibal, how about from your perspective? Where do you see things? How have things changed in your business, and where do you see them where do you see things going in the future?
Just to piggyback on what she said, I think first of all, it's a great question, but if I had to guess, our work is diversified between defense, intelligence, civilian, and state. The areas that we've seen the most uptick have been cyber, cloud, your emerging technologies like artificial intelligence, robotics, healthcare, as she mentioned, and even supply chain, because you have to be able to move material, as we've seen with COVID-19. Other professional services, I think, may be impacted, because I think at some point agencies are going to begin to consolidate and look for ways to save money. We've seen that with some of our own contracts, primarily the positions that most people would consider staff aug. Those are areas I think, but I think the big challenge right now is I don't think anybody really knows what the impact of the federal stimulus packages have on GovCon. What impact will this surge in government debt have on the financial markets and the broader economic recovery? Who's going to finance the debt? Is the government just going to forgive it and write it off? I doubt it, which means at some point there are likely to be significant cuts. And one has to believe that GovCon eventually will be impacted, but to what degree? I'm not sure that anybody currently has that answer.
Yeah, it's a very, very good point and very good question. But JJ, fortunately, will have the answer for us.
I wish. Yeah, so I think from my perspective, there's a couple of things that we're doing right now. I agree. It's going to be tough to predict. It's tough right now to predict with certainty what's coming down the pike on a number of these issues, especially with regard to spending. I think what's making it more complex this year is that it's a presidential election year. So that there's always that sort of uncertainty during this time in this cycle, and priorities often shift significantly depending on election outcomes. So it just adds a level of complexity to it. I mean, one of the things that we're doing as a company is we're focused on sort of the fundamentals of what has gotten us to this point in time, and not being too distracted by the unknown. I mean, in the end of the day, we're focusing on continuing to execute the best that we can. And I think most of the companies that we talk to are doing that as well. And then at the same time, we're trying to look for opportunities where there might be, just as a result of the disruption, there might be ability to add value in the government. One of the areas that we're keeping a close eye on is in infrastructure. That's been a topic for a long time with regard to public spending, but it may be an area that gets more focused based on a number of factors, but we think that's an area to keep an eye on. And then we're trying to remain flexible as possible, because so much of the future is unknown. So a lot of our company discretionary spending, we're trying to find ways to continue to invest with the flexibility to kind of throttle that up or down, depending on opportunities that present themselves, or differences and changes in the market. So that's sort of where we're focused. I don't have a firm answer. I would be suspicious of anybody that had the answer right now. But I do think there's ways to kind of adjust and be flexible given the dynamic nature of the current environment.
Yeah, no, those are all great thoughts. Actually, could you go back, Brett? So the one of the things, I think one of our center fellows wrote a piece, which was in Defense News last week, that talks about sort of the stickiness of budgets. The good thing, and this is very true in the Department of Defense and also with other agencies, is that you have to build your budgets essentially 2 years out. So and they're approved, kind of well in advance of the actual obligations. So, there seems to be sort of at least a couple year lag before significant cuts can happen. So that happened in the case of, sequestration didn't come right after the market collapse of 2008. It came several years later. So, I think so. There's one benefit that's going to impact the industry there. What are you all seeing in terms of how it's impacting competitions in terms of, incumbent positions you have and so on. There's been a lot of focus on how government is spending more, putting things on contract faster. Even existing non-COVID related spend has been accelerated in some agencies. Specifically, I've heard the Department of Navy do that. Have you seen that happen in your business, and have you seen any impacts on the effects on incumbency in today?
Yeah. From our perspective, I think, like I said, it just depends on the agency and the type of work, to be honest, because some of the work that I mentioned that most people would consider staff aug or, just your basic services type, we have lost some incumbent work recently, even with excellent CPARs, and we've lost on price. Now, other areas where the work is a little higher in, I think then the government tends to avoid risk because you currently don't want to make a changeover during this time. And I think a lot of times when you look at the FAR, most of the contracts have like a -8 or -9 clause, which allows the government to extend it 6 months or up to a year or something like that. But I think it really just depends on the type of work. Like I said, most of our work being in the defense and intel community, risk avoidance is key. But again, for some of the other work that we would consider, your primary basic services, help desk, call center, we have lost incumbent work, and we've been there a long time, like I said, with the exceptional CPARs, and we lost because another company came in and was able to propose doing it at a 25 to 30% reduction. And so you're going to see it across the board, I think, like I said, but I think it really just depends on the agency.
I agree with Hannibal. It depends on the agency, and it depends on the work too. I mean, you can only suspect that some of the decisions that our clients have made was based on minimizing their risk, pushing the easy button when it doesn't impose them to a lot more, budget to spend, of course. So, I mean, we have seen sole sources and extensions where it might have gone to a big competition if it wasn't for all the logistical issues that COVID-19 has created. However, I think that's anyway temporary. It's not a permanent change.
Okay, great. All right, next. So business goes on even in COVID-19. Even though I think I've hired a person on my staff during this time. I want to talk to you, get your thoughts on where do you see employment trends in your company and in the overall kind of GovCon space. We're fortunate in the sense as overall community has not been impacted nearly as much as some of the pure retail or hospitality industries. But what have you seen on some of the on the impacts on your workforce? So we'll start with JJ.
We were talking about this a little bit as we were preparing. One of the things that, and it's just been a very recent kind of notice, it could be an anomaly explained some other way, but we've seen a definite increase in applications for open positions and sort of diversity in backgrounds and even regions that they're applying from that we didn't see in the past. Candidly, I haven't seen a big change when we look at the DC area and applications, but we have noticed just from our own sort of applicant pool, folks that are from outside of the area from different industries that may have come from places or industries that have been more directly impacted. We've seen an uptick in those types of applications. I think from an employment standpoint in this area, in this industry, my sense is that things will be fairly stable and the skill set will remain, fairly consistent with what's historically been here. I read in one location that of the markets based on education and industry and that sort of stuff, that DC was one of the top in the country, along with a few others on the West Coast with regard to stability. So I think that will continue. I do think for folks that are searching for employment, kind of the same thing that we're talking about with regard to kind of doing our due diligence and continuing to focus on, client expectations and priorities. It would be good if you were, and just say, I'm from the School of Policy and Government. So if you're a public policy person and you were interested in public government service, some additional kind of investigation as to policy priorities that look like that they will be coming in the future and that sort of thing, to kind of be able to focus on the job market a little bit more maybe than it has been in the past. But I think that the employment is going to stay stable in the DC area for federal government.
I can add to JJ's thoughts on this. So I think we see kind of two trends, which probably both are justifiable. On the one hand, we see that when our recruiters do targeted sourcing, they go to a candidate that they want to hire, the manager or recruiter, and the person happens to be employed. I think recently we have seen a bit of challenge because people don't want to take the risk and change. And I think that's, again, temporary. On the other hand, we see a lot of candidates applying to the recs, which might mean, people who are laid off or they have to change jobs, etc. So I think we see both trends, which kind of, I guess, possible to explain both under the conditions. But like JJ said, I think over time, it's stable. I think like the experience of these times showed that you can totally interview over Zoom, get a good enough sense of the environment you are getting in, and also for the employers to assess the soft and hard skills of the person. So I think that is the silver lining of these times. Again, more flexibility for the candidates to apply for different jobs that are available. I think there is the long term for GovCon employers. There's that challenge for our area with Amazon and the type of jobs that might be available for our types of candidates. There is probably that challenge to be faced in the long term.
From our perspective, we're still hiring, and we're looking for good talent. As you mentioned, GovCon really has not taken a hit, and in fact, I think, like you mentioned earlier, the spending has increased. Obviously, with so many people laid off or temporarily furloughed, it has expanded the talent pool, which makes it even more competitive. I can't tell you how many requirements or recs, as Haleh said, that we get applicants for when we put out a job posting now, where before we may have gotten 4 or 5. Now we can get 10 or 20. So, and it kind of reminds me of the .com era right after I graduated from Mason, and I was working in IT myself, and I was a casualty and laid off, and I was making a pretty good salary. But at that time, I remember going back to interview, and I couldn't find a job because my salary requirements were so high. But I had to realize that I was competing with people that had far more experience and far more skills that were recently laid off, that were willing to reduce their salary to take work. And I think we're starting to see that now, is that when we get some of these applicants that typically may command 6 figures in a strong market, now are even willing to accept a little less just to get their foot in the door, because they have to take care of their families. And so, when we talk about this, I think, even some people and some experts believe that we may be approaching like the 4th industrial revolution, where you may see, up to 7 or 8 million jobs predicted lost in the near future. A lot of that is due to technology. Technology has been a major disruptor. So when you look at robotics, AI, 3D printing, biotechnology, machine learning, all those different emerging technologies, everything is being amplified. And they're not really competing, but they're building on top of one another So certain industries are probably going to not necessarily be replaced completely, but I think they're going to have to adapt, which means that the workforce is going to have to adapt their skills in order to stay relevant in a changing workforce. And I think right now, I think it's probably our responsibility to talk to the undergrads and the students that are getting ready to graduate to make sure that they're prepared, because a lot of these, and it's not to diminish anybody's degree, but there are a lot of degrees in schools now that when you graduate, it's very hard to find a job after you graduate. And so you come out saddled with student debt, looking for employment, and now you have to either relearn a new skill anyway. And I think those are the challenges. But I think overall, from a market standpoint, there are a lot of people out there looking for work. As Hale mentioned as well, I think we've recently run across as well from our perspective where we had employees or candidates apply, but I don't think they really ever had any intention of coming on board. They were using it to leverage with their current employer for a raise. And, so everybody has a different motive, but I mean, we've gone back and forth, so we've seen both sides of it, but I think at the end of the day, we have to take care of the people and we have to do our part. And that's make sure that everybody's prepared to work in the workforce, as the environment and everything changes.
Fascinating. It's really interesting to hear sort of the change in sort of candidates for your roles. It sounds like people don't necessarily have more time, but maybe they do have more time, less commuting, so they, folks are rethinking their roles, and so that maybe or rethinking geographically where they are, which may be impacting some of the things you're seeing. So fascinating. All right. So next, you all have each talked about to a degree how COVID has impacted your operations, and the physical nature of it is very clear. I mean, as you said, you don't have your folks going into the Pentagon as much. Well, they're not going there at all right now. The question is to stay that way. Hannibal, you've got a bunch of folks in Intel, so I want to talk a little bit about the physical nature of your work and how you really focusing on how you think that's how much is this going to stick? One of the things I've said before is, I knew I've been in government and I've been in consulting in the industry side. So I knew when I left industry back in 2015 to go into government, I knew I was changing from a culture of lots of telecons. This is even before Zoom, really. Lots of video meetings and telecons, less face-to-face meetings. In the Pentagon, everything was face-to-face, face-to-face, face-to-face. I probably had 2 telecons a week. And when I was in government as an SCS. So now that's changed dramatically. How much of that's going to stick? And what do you all? So let me just start with you, Have. We'll get your perspective and we'll work our way down on this one.
Okay. So for the most part, our customers in the Intel and our employees that work in the Intel environment have still had to go on site. They were considered what you consider or classify as essential employees. Now, I think each agency came up with their own internal policy regarding social distancing, or even having some of the employees come some days where other employees come other days. But we weren't able, and we weren't afforded the luxury in most instances for folks to work from home, because when they work in a SCIF, there is no remote access. There is no way to log in and support the warfighter or the folks that are downrange. What we've seen on the civilian side is, yet they have been a little bit more lax, and they have allowed the employees to work from home as well as the customer. And I'm not sure if that's going to stay a trend or not. I think at some point it may be 50-50. I think that they're realizing that the productivity is still there. The challenge, though, is trying to, as a company and as a CEO, is to make sure that everybody is doing their due diligence. Obviously, that's part of the work-life balance, right? So you want to give your employees the flexibility. They don't have to necessarily log in at 8 to 5 as long as the work is getting done. The challenge is, when the government or the client wants to have meetings and your employees are out shopping, or they're out doing something else during the core work hours, it makes it a little difficult, because there has to be a certain level of trust built in there as well between you and the client, because they want to make sure that you're getting paid, that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. From a DoD side, and like I said, the Intel side, we weren't afforded that luxury, and it may be, again, because it's the clients that we have. One of the clients, they did have some folks test positive at the agency, so they did clear out. And I think they cleaned the facility, and probably within 2 to 3 days, we were expected to be back. Now, again, the government, to my knowledge, the government employees weren't requested to come back, but the contractors were. And, that's part of our contract. So as a corporation, as a company, we had to put certain measures in place as well to make sure that folks were wearing, their masks, the gloves, the PPE that you hear about on the news, to make sure, because again, I'm sure every business right now is worried about liability and lawsuits. And so just to answer your question and to sum it up, I think, like I said, I think it again depends on the clients that you serve. But on the DoD and Intel side, we haven't really had that luxury. On the civilian and state side, they've been a lot more flexible in regards to, requiring our employees to come on site and to support them.
I can add to that. I agree with Hannibal that it depends on the client, the type of service you provide to them, their security measures. So I think the silver lining here for us was that there is also, most of our employees are on the client side, like I think from what I understand, Hannibal's employees are the same. And I think, for our company, so with the community of our employees, we have a lot of functions. We had happy hours monthly to, rotate in different areas of the DC Metro to get to see everyone. We had all hands in person, very engaging. And now we have learned to better use our our tools, technology. And especially when it started to establish that trust with the clients, they say at time of difficulties, you need to lead from the front. So we try to really set examples for our employees that, you have to stay connected. You have to gain that trust. If you show to your, VA government lead or at the Pentagon to the DoD that you are even more productive doing this, we may get to perform this work, in the future. You may be able to stay at home if you're sick and you still want to work. And I think, again, that was the silver lining, because we used our tools a lot better. We stayed connected. You're always on IM. And those kind of measures, kind of as a culture, were cultivated so that our staff use them with their clients. And overall, I think there was a change that might help to, in the future, where it's possible to, again, implement some of the changes in business operations we have seen in the future. At least I think they would be the feasibility of using our processes and tools more effectively.
Great. All right, JJ, real quick.
Yeah, a couple of things. 6 to 12 months, I'm not sure, but 3 months, I feel pretty confident. Through the summer, I think from our standpoint, most of our work will remain in a telework status. In the DC area, what we're seeing is a limiting factor. Most of our work is on the civil side and agencies that don't, it's not the Pentagon, which has a huge parking lots and kind of their own sort of infrastructure to support. Is public transportation is a huge limiting factor. And if you look at like WMATA, Metro line, Orange line out to Virginia, basically shuts down in Arlington, doesn't go any further west because they're doing major, kind of renovation or upgrades that they think that they could do now because there's such low ridership. So public transportation and parking facilities and those sorts of things are driving most of our clients for both the government and the contractor side to really kind of embrace telework where possible. On our classified work, it's become a little bit challenging. Much of our classified work is at an interagency level for aviation programs. So because there's a bit of inconsistency across agencies with regard to how they're handling this, those discussions to keep them going are challenging because there's not a consistent kind of answer across the agencies. So we're seeing that challenge. But I think for us this summer, it would be really an emphasis on telework. I have been really impressed with the speed with which our clients on the civil side have embraced teleworking and have really, I think one of the things that the silver linings of this, I was talking to just a personal friend of mine that actually works at FDA. One of the silver linings of this was that they said, and I thought it was really interesting, that COVID-19 has accelerated the government's ability to understand their capabilities in the telework environment by 20 years. You know, that there's certainly limitations, but we have clearly demonstrated that it's possible, and that it can you know, sort of continuity of government can be maintained in a telework environment, with some exceptions. But that's been kind of an interesting observation, and we'll see long term how much that has impacts. I do know one of our clients has given a sort of 3-phase return, and in the last phase, it says essentially establishment of a new normal of telework balance. So there's those indications that there may be a higher telework sort of sort of presence or capability after this sort of COVID-19 crisis is behind us.
What do you think? One of the things that I've sort of struggled with, and I think companies are, I'd love to get your perspective on, is to that last point, JJ. You know, agencies like, you know, the states are starting to open up, communities are starting to open up. Soon, companies are going to start opening up, and so are government agencies. There's probably going to be a higher level of telework, but sort of the question I have is, when are we going to be able to get back to doing some of the real face-to-face kind of engagements and like conferences and the like? Because it seems to me that's, you know, a lot of organizations, including mine, are, even though we're scheduled a conference at the end of October, we're actually going to shift to virtual just because it's so uncertain in the environment in terms of, if you build it, will they come, you know? And then also concerns about potential second wave, if there's such a thing, those kind of things. So what are you all feeling in your firms about that, that move towards kind of more face-to-face engagement, and then, you know, potentially at the in group settings?
I would say, from my standpoint, I support the put in my bio, the Air Traffic Control Association. They have an annual conference in September. Those large scale, I don't think any of those are going to be done through the end of the year in person, and probably early next year at a minimum. Mostly because there's such a lead time on them that there's a risk. Now, having said that, a lot of those organizations have longstanding commitments with, you know, vendors and locations and that sort of stuff. So there might be a move at some point to hybrid sort of events. But I think for the large ones that you were describing, if that's the focus that you're talking about, I don't see that happening through the end of the year for the most part.
Yeah, one of the things, Jerry, I think that, you know, we also have to think about, and I think it's going to have a major impact on this, is the school system. So when do the school systems reopen, and do the parents feel comfortable sending their children back to school? Because if not, then somebody has to stay home, you know, with the homeschool or however that works. Because I know my children's school, they already are talking about doing either probably a hybrid format or online in the fall, which means that some parent has to stay home, one or the other, or even both. And, you know, if that's the case, and I live in Maryland, so I'm not sure if Virginia is looking at the same. I know Governor Hogan had talked about, I think it was a 4-phased approach. I think we're probably in phase 2, and some businesses are starting to reopen. But again, until the parents feel comfortable sending their children to school, I think that's going to have a major impact on this, regardless of what the industry says. And, you know, we're going to have to work together collaboratively to figure out what the best solution is for both the industry and the families. Because obviously, you know, as you know, most of the folks in the DMV are working in GovCon in some capacity. And right now, like I said, I don't know much about the Northern Virginia schools anymore, but I know in Maryland, they are already looking at online in the fall. And with the agencies out here, how does that work? You know, because the government employees also have children too, so somebody's got to be at home.
Yeah.
So just a thought to add. I totally agree, and I think that leads to the challenge of business development on both sides, you know, for government to have, you know, the platform to interact with vendors on a very dynamic, you know, platform that we have done before, and also for industry. That's where I think the challenge comes, you know, kind of going back to everything we talked so far, you know, spending and all that. If our business, again, it seems like from this panel and outside, our colleagues in the industry are, you know, sustaining the business. But I think over time, there can be an impact because of this, you know, limited networking, conferences, industry days, etc.
Yeah. Great. I think at least that's great. Let's go to unfortunately, the conversation is going so well, we're getting low on time. But so let's, our final topic here is on really what you all are exemplars of small business entrepreneurship, you know, and many of the folks on the call are also entrepreneurs themselves, and as alums, you guys can really give some advice. So what I want to do is fold in, we've had a couple of questions come in, fold those into sort of this final kind of these thoughts on how do you see the post-COVID world impacting kind of your approach to small business entrepreneurship. Specifically, one of the questions actually from Samit is like, so much of the business development, how you all respectively build your business was on, you know, kind of building relationships. And that's, how do you do that? How do you capture new work without those kind of personal connections? Do you see us moving back in terms of, this is impacting the opportunity space? You know, do you see us moving more to price sensitive procurements because you can't build that intimacy? Or what do you, and then also the other question had to do more with some of the things we're just talking about. How do we handle the environment when the childcare situation is unclear with schools? But love to get your starts, and can we start with we'll start with Hala, please.
Yeah, sure. So again, like I said, I think that's the challenge. And from every situation, if not, you know, we can kind of try to turn issues to opportunities. You know, what did we learn from this? How can we, you know, again, use this as an opportunity to bring value to our clients? You asked about small business, especially like set-asides. I mean, this is the time that there are needs that the government may need nimble, agile acquisition. That's where, you know, the set-asides are appropriate. So I think, again, just like we teach our candidates for the finding opportunities for personal career, to interact, to be persistent, to use Zoom and, you know, other virtual platforms to connect with, you know, the network. The same thing goes, I think, with someone who's, you know, a small business owner. Again, I think it's a challenge, but there are also opportunities as a result to identify.
JJ, you want to go next?
Sure. My advice to entrepreneurs during this period of time would be probably the exact same as my advice during 6 months ago, which would be do it. And the challenge you're going to run into is different than you would have run into 6 months ago. But you know, finding ways to solve problems and address challenges if you're starting your own business is the business you're getting into. So so I think that, you know, there are unique opportunities in this environment. And there are things that can be done in this environment, and small companies that have innovative, creative ideas and passionate people are positioned in a unique way to solve some of those complex problems in ways that larger companies, that, sometimes are challenged due to internal bureaucracies or just other challenges within large businesses. So there's always that advantage of small business to creativity and innovation and kind of just work ethic. There may be interesting challenges with regard to financing and those types of things in this environment, but those are the challenges of this environment. And there are challenges for small business startups in red hot markets as well. So my advice would be to kind of focus on the value proposition of the organization and on how you're going to align that to the needs of the market, which is no different than I would give in any other environment. With regard to the future of some of the set-aside programs, I don't know. And my other piece of advice would be I would not focus on that at the earliest as a decision point on whether to start a business or not. Those programs can be incredibly valuable. We're an SDVO SB, and we've leveraged that designation. So I'm not to discredit them, but I think that is not something that you would necessarily want to lead with, and definitely not something that you would want to make the focus of sort of the value proposition of the early stages. So definitely valuable, but not sure that would necessarily impact a decision right now to an entrepreneur thinking of starting a business.
All right, Handel, can you bring us home?
I don't know about that, but I'll try. But the first thing I would say is you have to be willing to listen. I can't stress that enough, because you have to listen to your clients, your prospective clients, and your industries that you're focusing on, and try to figure out where the gaps are that you can fill, because during the times of uncertainty, there's always gaps. You have to be able to find that opportunity in the crisis. You also have to be sensitive, because everybody's lives have currently been upended. So you don't want to be that person that's just kind of, pestering everybody. But, I don't think any entrepreneur or any business owner has gotten to where they are by not being aggressive. Innovative and strategic thinking companies will always create and seize opportunities in times of uncertainty. When we talk about BD or business development is still always about relationships. But we have to come up with a way to strategically recast the business and probably our brand online, because in the post-COVID-19 era, everything is going to become even more digital. Your marketing material, your website, your graphics, your social media, participate in webinars, blogs. This may be the first impression that somebody gets of your company. So you want to make sure that you put the requisite time and effort into ensure that it's well thought out and well written. Typically with BD, you're meeting folks at happy hour, you're meeting them at networking events. Right now, we don't necessarily have that opportunity. What does the future of the 8A program and other set-asides look like? I agree with JJ. As you mentioned earlier during the bio, we were a recent graduate of the SBA 8A program in December 2019. I wouldn't lead with that. 8A is not a capability. It's a socioeconomic status. It can help you get your foot in the door, but it doesn't guarantee you success. You have to create partnerships that add value. You have to learn how to compete. We graduated from the 8A program, like I said, about 6 months ago now, with probably 90% of our revenue being non-8A. So we started right out the gate learning how to compete. And there's parts of me that wish I would have taken more advantage of the 8A program when we were in it. And we didn't. But like I said, you can't lead with that, because you're not going to get anything out of it. As far as direct awards, though, if you are already in the 8A program, now is the perfect time, because we're approaching the end of the fiscal year. So if you have those relationships, agencies are looking to spend that money before the end of the fiscal year, you may be in line to receive a lot of direct or sole source awards without competition. That's something that we probably didn't take advantage of as much as we could have, but that revenue allows you to build up your infrastructure you need so that when you do graduate from the program, you're ready to compete. Call the government or call the folks that you may know right now, contracting officers, and find out, what are their requirements. Again, we're in June, or June 1st as of today. Again, most of those agencies start to appropriate or earmark that money for the 8A direct or sole source program between, June and July, because that's get out the door by September. And if I could say one final thing, it's people do business with people, not companies. So at the end of the day, people do business with people they know and they trust. So again, it all goes back to you building relationships and making people feel comfortable with you, because at the end of the day, the government is about risk avoidance.
Great comments, all. Great comments. Great. So do we have any additional questions from the floor? Brett, I think I've addressed them. I think we've addressed them all, but anything further, Brett?
Nothing right now. We do want to give that opportunity. Actually, sorry, Sumit has asked some, which has been talked about. So, the idea of building relationships. Yeah.
Yeah, we did. We addressed Sumit and we addressed the other question we had come in that concerned sort of the balancing, childcare and.
Yeah, that's what I get for looking at the chat and not the Q&A.
So great. Well, I'll just give you guys an opportunity. Do you have any final thoughts as before we close this out?
Say there were some questions, Jerry.
No,
Or we
I think we addressed the questions in the last segment.
Okay.
But do you have any final thoughts before we close it out?
Nope. I just want to thank you for the opportunity to participate along with the great panel. Obviously, this is my first webinar, as I mentioned to Brett. I wanted to thank Sumit as well. I'm not sure if he's on for the invite. But to the GMU alumni, if I can be a resource to you, I'm not sure how I can get my email address to anybody, but I'm more than willing to help. To anybody looking to go into the 8A program, again, I'm willing to help. It is about relationships. It's about building. But as I mentioned, I am a proud graduate of George Mason, so I will do anything I can to help, even if that's just sharing information.
Yeah, I think Brett should be able to, for any attendees, get any of you respectively in touch with any of our excellent panelists. And then you see on the screen there is a sort of the email and web addresses for executive development, for the Alumni Association, and for the center. So on behalf of you, Brett, and for Sumit, and as well as for our dean, the dean of the School of Business, under which we sit for the executive development, and my center, I want to thank you all for your participation in this really great conversation. It was really great to see you, Hannibal and Hala and JJ. I look forward to connecting again real soon, hopefully in person. All right, you too, Brett.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. And we will see you again. We have another one, Leading Patriots on Wednesday, talking about the food and beverage industry. Some of the executives in the restaurant and in the beer and wine industry will be joining us. So,
oh man, they've got to be happy now with things starting to finally move a little bit. Goodness gracious. Wow. Oh, God bless them. Okay.
Right. So, yep. Thank you. And to everyone else, have a lovely day and stay safe.
Thank you.